More than 1,000 people attended the sometimes fiery meeting about restarting the plant. KPBS's North County Bureau Chief Alison St. John was there. She joins me now, along with Kendra Ulrich of the environmental group Friends of the Earth. We should say that we asked Southern California Edison to come on the program. The company did not respond. Alison, what happened at last night's meeting?
Well, last night was an opportunity for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to bring the public up to speed about their investigation of Edison and San Onofre and the procedure, really, that they're going through before making a decision whether to allow Edison to restart again at 70% power, to restart Unit 2. So they went through, quite a bit of what has happened in the past, and they said that at this point they still have some very important questions that they want Edison to respond to before they will make a decision. And one of the most important is, would it be possible for the plant to operate safely at 100% power, because their license requires that? So there was that question, and the other question was whether the change in the design, the different support structures of the tubes, those tubes that rattled and got damaged, whether that constituted a design change or not. So Edison didn't actually say anything except to respond to questions at the meeting. The meeting was entirely a panel of NRC people talking about their procedure.
Kendra, Edison says that its global experts say that this reactor, Unit 2, is safe to restart at 70%. How does the NRC verify that, and how secure do you feel with that process?
Well, really the core of this issue is the fact that independent experts have not been given the opportunity to review that. However, our independent experts, Arnie Gunderson of Fairwinds Associates and John Large of Large Associates, have reviewed the data that they have submitted, and there are significant questions here as to whether or not the plan is safe to restart. Now, one of the big things that the public should be aware of is that there was a lot of contention among the experts as to, what caused these issues and how best to address them. For example, this was brought up in the public meeting that was just held in Rockville, Maryland, and one of the commissioners asked about this, about the fact that there seemed to be disagreement among the experts that Edison submitted as a part of the assessments to support their restart plan, that appeared not to agree. So there's still a lot of questions here, and questions that the public has a right to have answered through a public, transparent process.
And Alison, cities appear to agree on their concerns on whether this plant should restart. Last night, San Diego Mayor Bob Filner sent a representative to the meeting. What did he say?
Yes, well, the representative was Rob Wilder, who is the mayor's public advocate for energy and sustainability. He was one of just about half a dozen elected officials, including one from Los Angeles. But here is what here's an example of what the letter from Mayor Bob Filner said.
The restart of Unit 2, even at reduced power, is a dangerous experiment that threatens the safety of 8.2 million Southern California 8.2 million Southern California residents living within a 50-mile radius, including much of San Diego.
So he pointed out that if there was a restart, it should be taken in the context of what about alternatives, and he put a completely different spin, really, on this whole issue of how to decide whether to restart the plant. But he was not the only elected official there, but he was one of, basically we should say that there were no elected officials who appeared to say that they supported the restart.
Kendra, for the past week we've been talking about this leaked report that California Senator Barbara Boxer referred to last week, that she says shows that Edison knew that there were problems with these steam generators even before they installed them. Did that come up last night?
It was brought up by the public. The public were asking for the information in that report. This was not something that was on the agenda for this meeting, which is very significant because this is an issue that obviously is at the forefront of whether or not Edison can be trusted to restart these reactors safely. The public has a right to know what's in that report, and certainly the letter from Senator Boxer and from Congressman Markey raises some very serious questions as to what they actually did and what safety issues they were willing to accept in order to avoid this proper license amendment process.
Alison, very quickly, this report remains under wraps, right?
It does, and it's interesting because these meetings are designed to make the public feel included. I should mention there were a lot of union members there who did support the restart, but although the meeting was packed, the fact is that most people wanted to see a document that the NRC is refusing to reveal.
Alison St. John, Kendra Ulrich, thank you for speaking to us today.
Thank you.